Hello, welcome to the Josh Vlininski Show, and I have the great honor of welcoming Trish St. Hill. She just wrote a wonderful new book, and she's working on a new one. But anyway, she just wrote a book called Beyond the Mango Tree. Is that correct?
Beneath the Golden Mango Tree.
Oh,
Beyond the Mango Shade is the new book.
Yeah. I got it wrong. I was looking at the new title. And what will be the title of your new book?
Beyond the Mango Shade.
Okay. Now, you wanted to talk about a fascinating group of indigenous people from St. Vincent's, the Garifuna people. Would you please tell us about them and how they live and who are they and what makes them so fascinating, charismatic, and so precious to our planet? Go ahead.
Well, the correct name is Garifuna, or some people say Garifuna. The Garifuna people were a mixture, or are a mixture, of Africans who were shipwrecked while being taken to slavery off the coast of St. Vincent. They made it ashore mainland St. Vincent, first to a small island and then mainland St. Vincent, where they then mixed with the indigenous people and created what is today called the Garifunas. And in the 17th century would have been called black carriers by the Europeans, more specifically the British. The people lived very peacefully and existed in the same groups as the Caribs, or I prefer to say Kalinagos. The Carib is a name that was given to the indigenous people in the region, which was signifying that they were cannibals, they were flesh-eating people. And we know today that that was all part of the hype to dehumanize them. So the Kalinago, the indigenous people, mixed with the Native Indian and produced this hybrid group of people called the Garifunas. And later, the Garifunas and the Caribs were basically pitted against one another by the Europeans. And the reason for that is that there were lands that the Europeans needed for sugarcane, for cotton, indigo, things like that, which, you know, they used to amass their wealth. And in the instigation of splitting them up, the Garifunas, or black Caribs, ended up with the more fertile part of the land. And that presented an even bigger problem, because the idea was to split them up and kind of get rid of the black Caribs, or Garifunas. There was a main leader among the Garifuna people called Joseph Chatouillier. He is today what is called the national hero of the island of St. Vincent, because he was the paramount chief of the Garifuna people. He was really tactical. Strategically, he was very, very skillful. In terms of defending his people. You know, he formed many treaties with the Europeans, and those treaties were broken. He was very good at negotiating, but he was also good at defending himself and his rights. And he was eventually killed. He was basically ambushed and he was killed. There were several different accounts, but an ambush seemed the more likely scenario. And eventually the people were kind of disorganized without his leadership, so to speak, because now everything is in chaos, you know, and that was the idea. If you cut it off at the head, then everything is kind of fall apart. And these people were basically what I strongly refer to as a black Holocaust. These people were rounded up and they were interned at an island off of the coast of St. Vincent called Balisu. It's basically like a rock in the ocean, small little rock in the ocean, basically. Without proper nourishment and cover, they were kept on this island for about somewhere between 8 to 10 months. And subsequently, many of them died, and eventually they were taken to Honduras. So many of the Afrocentric people that you will see in Honduras and Belize, Nicaragua, and Guatemala are Garifunas. Not all, but many of the people that you will see there. Here in the United States, you can find over 80,000 of them in the Bronx. You'll find many in Brooklyn. You'll find them in Chicago and places like LA, etc. The Garifunas later from Honduras, well, they were actually taken to Roatan, and Roatan is this small island off the coast of mainland Honduras, which at the time I understand was British occupied. And they made it inland Honduras, made some deals with the Spanish. Later years, there were some issues, and many of them, for fear of political persecution, dispersed to other places like Belize, Guatemala, Nicaragua. So you will find them mainly in Honduras, Belize, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and St. Vincent, of course, because some were left behind who might have blended in later blended in with the other black population. You would find them here in the United States and several different places. But the Garifunas, interestingly enough, even though they were the ones, we're talking now about the ones that were exiled, they maintained the culture. But the culture of the people remaining in St. Vincent, the ones, that I would have descended from, they were not, they did not retain the culture. For instance, we have a language called, and I say we because it would have been my language had Europeans not exiled the Garifunas, called Garifuna. It's a Garifuna language. And I sort of get a little offended when people refer to it as a dialect, because it is a full language. And I kind of resent the notion that somehow only things that are European well, let me put it this way. Languages that are European in origin are almost always thought of as full languages. Conversely, languages that are not European in origin are almost never thought of as languages. They are instead dubbed dialects. And in my opinion, Garifuna is a full language. But I digress a bit there. The Garifunas maintain a very rich cultural tradition. Their food, their way of dressing, their festivities, their songs, their poems, the language, which is an amazing thing that survived. And out of 200, I think at the time that they were exiled, it was about 5,000 or so of them that were captured and interned or basically put in this concentration camp on Bali Sioux. And more than half of them, because of exposure to the elements and not proper nourishment, illnesses and so forth, died, and only 2,200 or thereabout was taken to Roatan. And out of that, you now have, they said anywhere up to 500,000, maybe more, because again, until very recently, people were not proudly, especially in the mother country of St. Vincent, saying, I'm Garifuna. You would not have heard people with that kind of pride. So there are many more that would not admit to being Garifuna. And in this particular case, it's hard to tell an exact count. Or nobody ever knows exact count of a group, but get a close estimation of how many Garifunas there are. So the Garifunas in Central America, very much like Felicia, had to learn many aspects of her culture from her brothers and sisters here in the United States that she met here. I'm going through the same thing right now. So I am learning to speak Garifuna. Not very fluently, but I'm getting there. And in my new book, you would have many Garifuna conversations. So I'm learning conversational Garifuna little by little. It's not as quickly as I would like to do it, but I'm getting there. And so the Garifuna in Central America, who are the exiled ones, who were disconnected from their mother country, interestingly enough, the ones that are making it possible for us now to retrieve back some of that culture, some of that language. And I don't mean to suggest that all of the culture died in St. Vincent. But we had a lot of it around us in terms of the food and different things that we believe in and so forth. We just didn't know where it came from. There was even what the origin of it was. We just thought it was Africa. And that was that, So, that's just to give you a little bit of information regarding the Garifuna people.
Isn't that is really fascinating. Tell us a little about their music and their ceremonial pageants and all of that stuff.
Well, in a few months, I think early next year, they're going to have a Miss Garifuna pageant. And usually the young girls, I'm trying right now to get someone from St. Vincent, a young girl from St. Vincent who is of Garifuna ancestry or descent, who would join, because so far it has been from the other countries of Honduras, Belize, Guatemala, Nicaragua. And we like to see Vincentians because I really believe that until Vincentians embrace that piece of themselves and explore it, that this whole thing with the Garifuna nation and everything they stood for and died for and fought to save would not be complete. So I hope, Josh, maybe you can even go to that. That would be sometime next year. I'll give you the information later on. But the whole idea behind me trying to write the book, not the whole idea, but part of the idea was to kind of teach those that, like myself, who disconnected or was disconnected from the culture, a little bit of it through Felicia meeting the Garifunas of Central America and learning from them. For instance, there was a mass a few weeks ago in Brooklyn at a Catholic church, and if you go into this church and witness this mass, it would literally, I know for me, the first time I witnessed it, it brought tears to my eyes, because I thought, wow, this would have been me. This would have been the way that, not necessarily exactly that way, but this would have been a piece of what I would have that I would have grew up knowing about. There is the clothing. They wear very beautiful clothing, and the beating of the drums. They would hand up the food to be blessed, babies to be blessed if there are any babies that need blessing. There is just something like you would never see in another Catholic church, because the Garifunas were determined, and still are determined today, to hold on to the African traditions, their native Indian tradition, to incorporate it wherever they live with the traditions of the country or their host countries. And that's just a little bit about their music. The other thing that you will see is a lot of their writings, their poetry, their belief system is very much intact today. And so, I think if any group wants to study a group of Africans in particular, or Afrocentric people, to see what it would have been like, because understand something, the Garifunas were not slaves. There would have been those runaway slaves that would have joined them. Okay? There would have been, let's say, from Barbados, let's say, St. Lucia, Martinique, in the region, there would have been Africans, enslaved Africans, that would have made it to St. Vincent and take up refuge with the indigenous people, or the Kalanagro, or Caribs, as they were called in those days, and produce this hybrid group of people. But as in general, the Garifunas, they were a nation of free black people. And I've often said that one of the things that I always look at when I look at the Garifunas, even of today, is how different it is. The spirit that they possess, the strength, when an African people have not been subdued or been beaten down by slavery. They're the epitome of what that would look like.
Well, here in New York, there's always one thing they always explore and talk about, and that is herbal medicine and indigenous cures. And I'm sure that the Garifuna people have their share of herbs and cures and all sorts of medical secrets that the rest of the world has lost. Is that true?
It is true. And I just visited St. Vincent about a year ago, and there was an elderly lady in the village of Fancy, which is one of the heavy Garifuna areas. And what she would do is take plants that are medicinal, and she would put them in a book and press them dry, and she would write what it's good for. And it was interesting to see, because, I grew up, and my mother would tell me, this is good for high blood pressure, this is good for diabetes, this is good for this is good for that. Our dream system, the fact that we feel that our ancestors look out for us beyond death. The fact that, we think a certain way. I start realizing that this came from the Garifunas, the food that we eat. My mother, I always remember, she always had this love of fish and green bananas, and cassava was a staple in our family. And so whether it was making dumplings from it, or a cassava bread, but it has been a staple in most Vincentian homes. But we didn't know from whence that custom or that way of eating came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really Amazing. Yeah, they always, in New York, there's always a group that goes into these wonderful cures of indigenous people. And I don't know where, I work with this producer here at MNN who is into reviving hemp oil, you know, from the marijuana plant. And, you know, everyone is so surprised to hear that that cure, hemp oil, is thousands of years old, was used in ancient Persia, and even here in the United States. Thomas Jefferson, Tom Paine, Adams wrote about hemp oil and how beneficial it is. And now it's not only not used, but it's very often against the law, which is ludicrous, you know.
Well, not to cut you off, but you know, it's interesting. I grew up, and I was always told that if someone has a problem urinating, that there was an herb called nettle. We say in the islands, we say stinging nettle, and it's very good for that. And I would laugh at my parents. Where did they get these things? How would you know that? How would you guys know? You know, I would laugh at them. And I was looking at a commercial, an infomercial, about 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, thereabout. And there was a doctor, a medical doctor, telling you that this is good for this problem. You know, I look at pomegranate. That is something that we grew up on, and we hear that it's good for this, and it's good for that, it's good for high blood pressure, you know, and things like that. And we would laugh and say, oh, these old folks with their stuff. You know, when you're a kid, you don't understand these things. And now we are looking at many in the medical community embracing these things as medical cures for some of these illnesses.
Yeah, yeah. Gary Knoll was talking about pomegranate today over WBAI and how beneficial it is. It's amazing that you touched upon it. Now, Felicia, the heroine of your novel, is she also the heroine of the novel that you're working on now?
Yes, she is still my protagonist. And Felicia gets into, in the second book, Felicia is fully grown. In the first book, it's a coming of age story. In the second book, she is fully matured, and basically, in the second book, she is exploring more of her Garifuna culture and customs, and she's more immersed in it in this book. So I think this book, the second book, is more heavily Garifuna, because at this point, Felicia, you know, speaks Garifuna, conversational Garifuna. Her son. I don't want to say too much, but you know, she's trying to make sure that he retains the culture, or first of all, gets immersed in the culture and retains it, which is very important to Garifuna people. That is how they were able to survive all these years in spite of all the atrocities. You look at the Garifunas in Belize, for instance. They dispersed into Belize because of a fear of political persecution, and you're looking at people that shipwrecked Africans that were intended for slavery. You're looking at Africa. After that, they were exiled into a new country, taken away from everything that they were used to and grew up knowing, and then had to disperse again into another region. And so, when you look at that, and you're saying, my God, and they survived. Their traditions are still intact. They're still able to come back and teach me, a Garifuna descent woman who grew up on the island itself, the culture. And I find that even the United Nations is amazed at the ability for the Garifuna people to be able to hold on to their traditions and really preserve it. I think it's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. What I want to ask you about now, which is really a very important question for writers, and that is, where am I? Okay, here I am. What I want to ask you about is, okay, you did a lot in getting published. How do you get published? Did you have to start your own publishing company?
I did have to start my own publishing company. I did not have to. I had a publisher and was going to go that route. But the more that I found out about the publishing industry, the more I was dissatisfied. and was not ready to spend 25 years writing a book and basically be told that I could only get this tiny percentage. So then my next step was, okay, I'm going to set up my own publishing company. And many people said to me, oh, the big publishers are still going to get their hooks into you. And I said, not really. So I then decided to start taking, publishing courses, learn about the publishing industry, and then sharpen my skills. I always liked to write, love writing, but then decided to sharpen my skills as a writer, taking some writing classes to kind of, develop myself better. And that's how Johnny Publishing was born, and that's how Trish St came to become a writer and an independent publisher. So I'm totally independent, and many people were thinking of publishing books. That might be what they want to end up doing. They might want to think of that, of self-publishing, and be aware that there are many out there that tell you, I'm going to help you self-publish your book. But at the end of the day, they're not really better, I should say, than the average traditional publishers out there, because they would basically tell you, we're going to help you self-publish, but we are going to give you 20% or 30% or whatever the proceeds from the books are, and then we'll take 80%. And so you might want to think of learning something about publishing, and basically establishing yourself as an independent publisher. That may be the route that most people have to go, that many people have to go, because how many people are going to get picked up by a major publisher?
Yeah, is it expensive to do that?
It is expensive, because at the end of the day, the good thing is that nobody owns my book. There's nobody I'm giving a cut to except paying my taxes and business-wise. But at the end of the day, you have greater control over your work. You are not being ripped off by someone. Mm-hmm. So it is expensive, because my printing costs, all of my expenses come, of course, out of my business expenses and my own pocket. But at the end of the day, I haven't regretted going that route.
And, while we're on this subject, here, let me put this up for a minute. This is Cornelius Rick's Half Moon Marketing. What role does he play, or what role does Half Moon Marketing play in all this?
Well, Half Moon Marketing, which is owned by Cornelius Ricks, is a marketing company. And because I am still, writing, I am publishing, I have a full-time job, I have family, I don't have the time to do the legwork. So he would be the person that would try to get me, like, book signings, on this show, for instance, and things like that. So that is where his book comes in. By the way, I have a book signing coming up at Hunan Bookstore in Harlem. It should be, I believe, around February 19th.
Oh, I'm going to come. I'm going to come.
On 125th Street at Hunan Bookstore. So I'm looking forward to that.
I'm going to be over at their cafe drinking their good cake and drinking their coffee. I've been there many, many times. Yes. I mean, that store was started by Michael Jordan and others.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And, I think one of the best times I ever had up over at the He-Man bookstore. I bought a lot of books there, by the way. Mm-hmm. One of the great... Oh, the last thing I bought was a Barack Obama bank just before, just after he was elected. They had a Barack Obama piggy bank, and you drop, it says, I want to give you some change, but give me some change. So every day I drop a few pennies into my Barack Obama book bank, and then one of the best times I had there with Mr. Percy Sutton. He had a book party there, and that was a lot of fun with his son, who at the time was managing radio station WLIB.
Okay, I know Percy Sutton.
And I love that building. I love that bookstore. It's a great bookstore. Right now, they're trying to come to grips with the digital revolution. Yes. Who knows what that's going to do to books.
And talk about digital, my book is also available on Kindle. So for people who want to get an electronic copy, Beyond the Golden Mango Tree is available on Kindle.
Did you hear that, folks? It's available on Kindle.
It's available on Amazon.com and at www.trishsthill.com. That's my website.
Yeah, well, I'm saving some time here. Like I have a triple screen here, so you're in the center, and you're to the extreme right, and I'm to the extreme left, and it's a very interesting screen because it has two impressions of a very beautiful lady by the name of Trish St. And it's a very beautiful, see, this is what the audience sees over here. So it's a triple screen. And let me put your name here and the name of your book. Beneath the Golden Mango Tree. Let me put that up. There it is. It's right under there. And so I'm so happy to hear that you're on Kindle. Well, anyway, this has been the Josh Vlininski Show, and I'm going to put this up on YouTube, and I have an account which is unlimited, so every word and every breath we say will be heard. In other words, there is no 10-minute limit on that account. That goes on forever. It can be played forever, Okay. And by the way, I'm going to connect you to Kathy Davis at WBAI that's having a book special in about a week. I'm going to phone you up and give you Kathy's numbers so you can talk to her and tell her to be sure to feature your books. And okay, as usual, I want you to have the final words.
Well, I just wanted to say that I hope that people would read the book for the many values and I should say valuable information that the book brings, but especially about this Holocaust that took place with this group of black people, and also to know as black people, Afrocentric people, that not all of us were slaves, that there were many of us who were free. Yeah, myself, I have a varied amount of mixtures, so of course I also came from that background, but the Garifuna people were not slaves, and so it's good to know that not all Africans have been enslaved. And I think that's one of the things I want people to walk away from this whole reading of the Garifuna culture, understanding that they were not an enslaved people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. And I'll tell you, I come from a Russian family. If you know anything about Russian families, you know that Russia's Shakespeare was a black man. So if you're literate in Russian, like my family was, our Shakespeare, Alexander Pushkin, was a black man, mulatto, and he had a rich African heritage. His grandfather was a great African general. Shakespeare cannot make that statement, but Alexander Pushkin, Russia's Shakespeare, can make that statement.
I learned something.
And that's fascinating. Well, it's been a great honor having you, Trish.
It's been a joy.
And thank you very much.